Good morning. All right. As a follow-on to the prior panel, now we're going to focus a little bit on, three megatrends, and I think the thing that most big investors or futurist technologists are really focused on. The question here fundamentally becomes how do they interact with each other? Is there a convergence factor? Do they yield new optimal results for society, particularly within fields of biomedical research, scientific R&D, and just advancements on human health span and lifespan? And so now I'd like to be able to introduce the panelists and ask them for a little brief background and introduction, and then we'll sort of move on to the panel discussion. And so Peter, you first.
My name is Peter. I'm founder of Jira AI, AI-driven drug discovery company with just super focused on longevity.
And you recently did a very big deal too.
Yeah, that's right.
Brian.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Novell, head of BD at Lagrange, and we are a zero-knowledge technology company. And for myself, I was a serial entrepreneur on the tech side for several years. Then I became a corporate lawyer, practiced in big law for about 7 years. And prior to being with Lagrange, I've been in crypto on a personal level since 2017. So excited to be here on the panel today.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. Boyang?
Hi, this is Boyang. I'm the founder at Immortal Dragons. We are a longevity VC fund headquartered in Singapore. We are currently running our $40 million US fund one. It's mostly internal funding. In terms of investment thesis, we have a focus on replacement strategy and gene therapy. We have a preference for moonshot earlier stage projects rather than more late stage stable pharmaceutical projects. I was educated here in Singapore and in the States. I come from a computer science background, so the topic today is very exciting for me. Thanks for having me.
Incredible. So I'm gonna pick on you first. Seeing you mentioned a few things there that really pique my interest. So you mentioned, you got a background in computer science. You're running effectively a longevity fund. So we're already talking two of the major trends right here. What do you define effectively as a moonshot, particularly within the longevity industry? What really moves the needle there? And also, is there a non-consensus view of something that you're excited about within longevity?
Right, it's actually a pretty hard question to even try to predict the future, especially when these mega trends present that might shift the paradigm for many things. So for our case, sometimes we would, it's hard to tell, it's hard to make any judgment call as to which is the moonshot project that is going to really move the needle and making progress. We wouldn't know, otherwise VC will be 100% success rate business, which is totally not the case. VC is a money-losing business overall, the sector as a whole, right? A few outliers, leading VCs will make some money. The rest of the people are pretty much just philanthropists who are spending their money for founders to chase their dreams. But that said, we have a preference for underfunded companies. And that might be an indication to separate moonshot, low success rate projects versus mainstream projects with more consensus, right? So when I'll give a concrete example. So we made some investment in companies that work on replacement strategy. By replacement, we mean rather than curing diseases, your organ systems can have thousands of ways of going wrong, and then conventional companies will try to fix these problems. Why not we replace the organ or organoid or tissues with a freshly baked new tissue that might be coming from donor, that might be coming from other in vitro genesis processes, right? Then one of the company that we invested in are working on brainless clones. Brainless clones that can serve as a perfect source of organs. That sounds a bit scary, and that company is badly underfunded. They've been raising funds for a long time. Many people, many investors, they have approached, agreed that this is a bold idea. If they succeed, this will change the world or at least move the needle, but they still fail to raise sufficient funding. That's a kind of sign for us, a moonshot project that have huge potential, but it's too scary such that it's starving for funding.
Interesting. Really like the identification of outliers and sort of what industry people call the non-consensus trade. But Peter, just sort of like moving on that, sort of just elaborating on that topic a little bit further. You know, you run a large AI platform. You've got pharma partnerships, assets and development, et cetera. But obviously, you've got this big focus on aging, and you also collaborate with the National University of Singapore here. So, how do you think about like best deployment of your technologies towards advancing some of the objectives within longevity?
Well, I think first of all, I think it's now a very good moment for longevity, because if you look what happens with pharma industry right now is that they have just developed a drug, series of drugs, which are these GLP-1 agonists that are probably increasing human lifespan by a little bit. So there is this on-market clinical data for that. So this drug is being sold now for $40 billion per year, and some of them are running out of patents, which means that pharma will have to compete with their own. They would have to be better than Beatles now, so they will have to compete with their own good drugs. And we can imagine that after they canceled lots of R&D internally, it's a very hard proposition. So they will have to put thousands of novel drugs into clinical trials just to compete with their best assets right away. This is probably the first longevity drug, and then for companies that do have good GLP-1 agonists, think what they should be doing in the future. Everything that is smaller than Ozempic is not cool anymore. So some of them are trying to do better Ozempics, but some of them already have good ones, and they are thinking about longevity, I think, seriously for the first time. So Eli Lilly, for example, put aside $500 million venture fund, and they are asking Mark Andreessen to run it. And back to your questions, I mean, what is going to happen, maybe back to your comment, I think what is happening right now is that pharma is not a small business anymore. With $50 billion with a single asset, IT and AI people are now looking at pharma as something that is probably interesting. And with their appetites for valuations, for disruptive potential, they are looking for things that are better than Ozempic. And it's almost obvious that a drug that is better than Ozempic is a drug against aging. So I think we're experiencing this Ozempic moment right now, and all companies that are focused on longevity may have something to offer to pharma, and pharma is listening for the first time. So that's where I think any approaches that are disrupting pharma are in good value right now. So there is a demand for that.
Interesting. Brian, thanks for stepping in, by the way. Like it was an 11th hour call up, so I'll try to be kind on the questioning, but you know, this one will take this has got a Web3 focus, a little bit DeSci angle here, and also you have a law background, so this will sort of help navigate around this a little bit. Like so, the entirety of pharma, biotech industry, and the numbers are just premised around legal protections that are used by patents and being able to preserve intellectual property. And so, you know, the foundational basis is make a public disclosure invention, you get a statutory monopoly for commercial exploitation for a series of time. But, you know, increasingly, I've just thought a lot about like zero-knowledge technologies, trusted execution environments, the way to preserve data confidentially, but be able to verify it. And, you know, I'd love to like maybe just share a little bit about like what Lagrange Labs does, just a little bit about zero-knowledge proofs and just like how you think that that could help enhance the world of like intellectual property.
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of Lagrange, what we are is a zero-knowledge company, and what we do is help generate zero-knowledge proofs wherever they will be most useful. Now, within the Web3 context to date, that has primarily been used with very limited successful application, mostly in scaling block space with L2s and rollups and the like, and arguably, for better or worse, privacy coins and tokens. So really, though, what we look for are opportunities within Web3, but just as importantly, and actually more importantly, outside of Web3 in Web2 and beyond. So what that really means is wherever zero knowledge can be useful, that's exactly where we play. Now, with DProve, which is one of our infrastructure offerings, what this allows for specifically with respect to AI is the provability and verification of AI. And that's exactly what that means is we can help prove that the correct model was used and that the correct outputs were derived from the inputs. So what this ultimately adds is a layer of definitive truth to AI. So we all know that AI is a technology that's here to stay, probably the most important of our lifetimes, and it's going to have applications in commercial settings as well as basically every other area of our lives. But with AI, like any technology, it's new, it's exciting, it's impactful, but there needs to be guardrails. There needs to be mitigating factors. And you mentioned about me being an attorney. I was a corporate attorney, and really the job of a corporate attorney is to look forward into the future and think about all the things that could go wrong. That is literally the entire exercise. And when we do that with AI, there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and not just the apocalyptic singularity scenarios which are popularized in the media. There's a lot of other arguably smaller but very, very important negative scenarios that could occur. And AI is not always correct, as we know. It can make errors. There are attack vectors. And therefore, having that layer of provability and truth to be able to verify the AI is of the utmost importance. So where Lagrange provides that verification is literally in any scenario where AI is implicated. And then once we get to that premise, there is an extraordinarily broad range of AI use cases and applications, ranging on one end of the spectrum from you or I figuring out what we're going to have for dinner tonight with 8 random ingredients in our fridge, de minimis, all the way to the other end of the spectrum when we're talking about something like military and aerospace defense using AI autonomously to guide drones and perhaps even missile strikes. So in any scenario more towards that end of the spectrum where there's the risk of health and human harm, risks of financial loss, reputational risks, etc., that is exactly the use cases where we need to really be sure that the AI has worked properly to then take those outputs and move forward with them. So, of course, when it comes to medicine and science, really the topic here today, that too is of the utmost importance. And one other final point is that the way it works with Lagrange and our solutions here is that they're also privacy preserving. So going back to your original question about the maintenance of intellectual property, look, if we just take a step back and think about medicine on a global scale, if we were to have the ideal scenario, collectively we would all work together, we would all share data, we would all move together to a common goal of helping humanity be as safe and secure as possible. However, what gets in the way of that are really two things. The first is privacy. A lot of the data that's needed here is private, both by regulation and probably by personal preference. And the second is credit and attribution for the contributions that go into these solutions. And Web3 and specifically Lagrange's offerings actually help solve both of those. And we can talk a bit more why, but ultimately that's really the key point here is that with Web3 technology, it's opened up the opportunity to properly attribute and credit contributions in a lot of different fields. We see this in the creative communities with original songwriters and then remixes and videos made from those remixes and subtitles on those videos. Down the entire line, you can credit the originator as well as each incremental contributor. And conceptually, that similarly can be applied to DeSci solutions and improvements.
Yeah, and it's speaking to quite a few academics who like the idea of like having, including your friend Ed Boyden. Ed was sort of saying he loves this as an idea for a relative degree of attribution. into a scientific process or something that, it's no any one person, it's a series of people effectively in collaboration, but unfortunately at times, particularly when it comes to critical claim and recognition, we always want to sort of put the spotlight on one person as opposed to a series of those people that effectively collaborate. So yeah, no, that's really interesting to effectively think through. You mentioned something that sort of is dear to the heart of us in the crypto community, which is about democratizing technologies. And so like, I'd probably, Peter, I'll ask you a question a little bit about this, because there is the prospect that we set off these powerful technologies and only a handful of corporations really become the economic beneficiaries of it. You know, the patent holders on the next GLP-1 drug class that effectively comes through, and you know, they lock down that chemical space, et cetera. I mean, people can find ways to work around it, but is there a way, how do you see like, you know, I mean, you come to a lot of DeSci events, but like, how do you see the world of like DeSci, Web3, and also AI, and that being able to empower people around, you know, solving scientific issues and problems?
Well, here is the whole bunch of questions. So first I have to say that you cannot patent biology, fortunately, which means that if something works in somebody's hands, then immediately there are lots of people who try to develop Me Too projects. And actually, if you look at pharma, most of them are developing Me Too projects. So I think the problem is not in terms of protection here. The problem is that they are not taking risks. So I think pharma does not develop enough new stuff. So we are ending up with having lots of the same stuff all the time. And I think this is dangerous for innovation. So one way where these new approaches can help is actually to make sure that we're producing enough innovations, to provide enough, let's say, upward pressure by developing novel products and demonstrating those to buyers. Another thing where I think democratization works is with AI. Think about it. So people complain when we come with mathematics to biology because people don't understand mathematics. But now every biologist can have access to lots of ultra high level science with the help of AI. Essentially, every person with ideas can hire a bunch of increasingly approaching PhD level scientists out of the box, which is, I think, huge, because before you had to work with a few exceptional people to do impactful science. Now I think what AI is doing is that instead of valuing skills, we will be increasingly valuing ideas. And I think this is super cool. Lots of people with cool ideas don't have, I don't know, resources to hire people. So I think democratization doesn't come from protection or restrictions. It comes from enabling people to do exceptional science, develop exceptional products, and put pressure on traditional pharma to accept novel products.
Interesting. And a point there that struck very strongly with me, because you know, I was sort of in one, so in a company that validated a new target that now has become the 4th most pursued target in the world, which is the 5-HT2A receptor. We did it via Compass Pathways, the psychedelic medicine company. And I remember VC, a very well-known Boston VC, saying to me, the way we work is you guys do all the hard work, validate the target, we just go set up a company with our friends. And then that's it. So no to your funding request, but good work. And so, Boyang, this was going to your point before a little bit about moonshots, because I think like there is a point, like whether it be academia, whether it be biotechnology, a series of other industries, because there's a lot of inherent risk attached. People will do this, like they'll run this Me Too approach because you know that effectively you know the drug target works. You're just like coming up with ways that you think you drug it better. You have a sort of better tolerability profile for patients, et cetera, or you optimize something along the supply chain. And so what you see is you see a lot of crowded innovation. People doing the same things. You know, there was a discussion before about groupthink effectively existing within industry. People just sort of like, you know, they run around, do the same things. And then there are these actually really transformative ideas that sit on the outside. And so, I'd love to hear more about like just how do you think we really mobilize the next set of transformative ideas? It's what we try to do within DeSci, but like from the venture capitalist perspective, like how do you think about building momentum for like other types of approaches?
We don't have a definitive answer, obviously. As of now, academia and the development of science is totally elite sports. That may or may not be the optimized, well, likely not the optimized way for us to advance science. It would be ideal if we can open up for more ideas, for more people to get involved in the process, the spark of creativity, coupled with solid empirical knowledge is oftentimes what brings us progress. To Peter's point, now everybody have a wealth of knowledge. They have this PhD level assistant at their disposal. That's a great sign. Actually, I will also argue that even before the AI megatrend, if you see how we all pretty much can freely access the wealth of human knowledge at people's fingertip, is a sign of democratization. But turns out people rather, well, watch, I don't know, cats and dogs all day rather than actually picking up any knowledge or looking into science. For that issue, I don't have an answer, but it seems individuals are more empowered than ever to come up with ideas, to participate or get involved in the scientific discovery process. That said, okay, that's about the emergence of creative ideas. And of course, once one breakthrough idea kind of get proven, then is the capitalism mechanism that kicks in. Well, there will be a group thinking, there will be VC bros that come in.
And everyone says, oh, the market's big enough for like 200 companies to be doing this.
Yes, but still the innovator will get some credit. And they will end up oftentimes in a pretty good place via acquisition or otherwise get acknowledged. That's from my perspective, that's actually what I want to see. Rather than, well, the first innovator is supposed to get all the credit and benefits. I would rather more talents, capital, resources get attracted into this field. Then whoever succeeds in the end is a good thing for society as a whole.
Yeah, and we've witnessed this before, right? Like Elon Musk and electric cars, for example.
They open source the patents, and now all competitors are coming in. Some are building a product that's cheaper and arguably better in some aspects. And it seems he doesn't hold grudge. So.
Yeah, Brian, just a question for you. Discussing like some of these luminaries that like really open up new fields, and a lot of the prevailing discussion at the moment is like the ultimate objective of some of these big AI models is like to move beyond general sort of enhanced productivity within the workplace to solving the world's big scientific issues. It's like what Demis Hassabis, like Sam Altman, Elon Musk are really talking about. I heard an interesting discussion recently that that they thought the threshold for sort of artificial general intelligence was like an AI coming up with a new beautiful theorem of the universe, like the general theory of relativity that just played together so neatly. But I mean, how do you think about the veracity of the claims, particularly when you have a technology that is based on proofs, right, coming through? And I think you disclosed a little bit before, but it's sort of like there's a point where people are going to hear all these hyperbolic statements, and then they'll want to see the evidence of it. There have been some things that happened in the scientific R&D field from OpenAI and a variety of others, where they've made claims like DeepMind went and approved AlphaFold, right, by like actually entering it into a competition, is the only pathway for people to open it up to the public and actually show the way it works. Can zero knowledge proofs actually help in that circumstance? Is there something that like the world of decentralization can also offer in that respect?
Yeah, I think as AI advances to AGI and beyond, what that means is that it'll be capable of being equivocal to humans with human capabilities, and then perhaps superintelligence from beyond there. And when AI essentially becomes equal to humans and beyond, if we're talking to it like we're talking to a human, it's the same issues that come up when we're talking to humans. We need to be able to trust what they're saying. So that concept of trust and truth is just as applicable, if not more, whether we're talking with a robotic human or the like, or a regular person. So those fundamentals will be in place wherever they are. And if we extrapolate forward to X number of months and years from now, it's the kind of thing that if we can imagine it, it's probably going to inevitably happen. This is not stopping anytime soon, and it will likely get to the point where it is answering those biggest questions and having those impacts that we probably cannot even conceive at current time. So I like to think that in X number of months or years from now, we will look back on the use of AI without verification and without proof, like we would look back on driving cars without seatbelts. Without having that additional layer of security, trust, and protection, it would be absurd. And the question really is, why wouldn't somebody wear a seatbelt? And that's just conceptually in terms of the universal applicability of proof and security to this. But when we talk about the impact of providing that definitive cryptographic proof, the better analogy is like riding a motorcycle going 150 kilometers without a helmet versus then being able to drive a tank, and a tank perhaps wrapped in additional layers of security. It is that different in terms of the jump from unverified AI to verified AI. And if it's as important as it is now, when we get to those later stages of the game, it just increases in importance exponentially.
Thank you for that. So we're in Singapore at the moment, and I just really am increasingly, I mean, I think you're based here. Yeah. And so just increasingly see the rise of like Asia from like the innovation perspective, and you know, it has almost a little bit more of a blank canvas to be able to come up with like supporting regulatory systems for some of these things we're trying to effectively achieve. You know, we're talking a lot before that like longevity is trying to shoehorn itself into a disease-based regulatory model that was developed like, you know, 60, 70 years ago, et cetera. And so, you know, I mean, how do you think things will just advance within the region, particularly from the longevity, like from a longevity health span related perspective, adoption of AI effectively into industry, and just like how that and how regulators might be able to move. You can assess product liability claims, other degrees of self-reporting, but what do you think the whole confluence of that perspective looks like?
Well, I think there are a few trends important here. So first, this region is an epicenter of a demographic catastrophe that is emerging. So this region is hit worst at this time. Think about Japan, which is almost like self-liquidating in front of our eyes, also Southern Korea. Think about China with the consequence of this one child in the family situation. Well, in Singapore, people are living for a very long time. And as you know, that aging is not just a bunch of diseases. If you look at people who are 90 years old or plus, technically they are almost disease-free, because if they had diseases, they would be dead by that age. But functionally, they are shadows of their previous selves. These people cannot climb stairs. These people cannot help their grandkids with math problems in school. So their functional performance degraded. So what happens here is that more and more people are living, the average lifespan here in Singapore is almost 80 years. So people are functionally declining, so this economy is losing productivity, and at the same time, that they are kept alive. So that's exactly what happens when you are curing diseases and you are not addressing aging. So I think this region in particular will face the choice whether to fight the functional decline, and that is to address aging itself, or to keep to that old paradigm of quenching one disease at a time. So this is first. And second is that when you don't have enough people, what you do, first you try to solve aging, and Singapore has initiatives here. And second, you are trying to rely on AI, and that's what we see in China, by the way. And you are trying to rely on AI in biotech and pharma. And if you look at China, China is now doing lots of novel drugs, and they are investing super heavy on AI. So I think if you look at this region, because it's been hit by aging just a lot, you will see all the emerging solutions. Reliance on AI, robotics, focus on longevity, maybe disrupt the disease-based, disease-focused model of longevity, AI in hospitals. I mean, in China, people are calculating scores, like social scores for people. So, of course, AI is used a lot in societal problems. Lots of taboos on sharing data, analyzing data are broken in this region for the good. Obviously, in hospitals, lots of AI-driven systems are increasingly accepted and used. So I think everything that humanity can throw at consequences of aging is being tested here. AI, robotics, and medical data processing, and disruptive biotech are all the components of these solutions, and you can see them emerging in this region for a reason.
It's, they always say that like necessity is the mother of all invention. Just hopefully you don't get to a point of crisis when it's actually too late to effectively address these things. Boyang, just a question to extend a little bit beyond that is, how do you think like governments effectively respond to this? Like, do they open up new regulatory pathways where, you're like an elder citizen, you can get a drug delivered prophylactically that might be able to enhance like elements in neurocognition, memory, recall, functional mobility, etc., to keep you active longer? Because like I know, and I witness, because I spend a lot of time with governments across the world and diplomatic channels, that they care when they see GDP going down. That is their like big thing, right? And so they're always looking to like either not, they don't want to preserve it, they really want to enhance it. But like there is this thing like, modern economies were built on just like having more and more people just add to broader based economic resource. And so, is there going to be some innovative thinking on the policy side?
Well, yeah, so I'm no regulation expert. In our fund, we were able to support one of the longevity network state, Vitalia, at its early stage. But other than that, but I agree that government totally cares about productivity. They care about productivity decline, and retirement age is always a hot topic in whichever society. So probably they have an angle there, but it's also long term. So you have to find a government that have a stable sovereignty such that they actually care about what happens in 10 years, 20 years. If they start some research program, intervention right now, then they will see the benefit in decades to come. But I would like to just add to the previous question about how Asia as a region can play a role in the current development. I'm very rooted in Asia, and I think there are a few, I'll give a few concrete examples about how longevity might have a great potential. So number one, historically, religion is less dominant. It manifests in a different way, but it's less dominant in this region. So much so that people believe less in an afterlife heaven, but clinging more to their life in this life. So with that, longevity is less of a taboo, but more of an acceptable pursuit. That's number one. Number two, to be very frank, test subject recruitment is definitely easier. So all clinical trials are cheaper here in this region. Of course, the clinical trials might need to be reproduced again in different regions, but at least we have a baseline. And the reason being, well, the sheer number of population is just bigger. So every disease, every subject of every condition will be more. And there are also, of course, other underlying socioeconomical reasons. So clinical trials are cheaper. And even animal experiments, right? Primate experiment in the US is near to impossible to get approved nowadays. So much so that macaques and other monkeys is very expensive in North America, but it's much cheaper in, say, at least China and some other countries. Of course, there cannot be exports, is practically impossible, but that also shows another obstacle that gets at least removed in this market. So with these factors.
Amazing, thank you. So maybe just one last question to all the panelists before we conclude. So like we in the DeSci community are a whole bunch of dreamers and doers. And so any deep desires or wishes that you want to communicate on what you would like to see change within current systems, things that we or others ought to build for. I mean, I've heard a couple of things along the path of this discussion whether it's like sort of radical leaps in mindsets for innovation and things of the sort, but just any lasting remarks around like, what's the big dream?
Yeah, I will try. So I like to look historically, I think like sequentially generations of successful people are shaping our ideas about the future. So if you look at, let's say, old money, like traditional financial capital, these guys are now pretty old and they are investing in Alzheimer's disease or other diseases basically for their kids, right? Because of the age. Then we have like IT people, I mean, people were young when they made Google, but now they are not so young, so they're investing also in curing diseases. So essentially the only demography with resources that is young, relatively young, is crypto community and also emerging AI community. So these people have longer horizon for themselves, meaning that they should be able to participate, contribute, organize or fund, doesn't matter. Projects that on the longer run can actually disrupt aging. Because all the other demographies with money, unfortunately, are too busy, curing their current medical, addressing their current medical situation. I think it's a huge potential, so it's negated a little bit with the fact that younger people are less concerned about medical future. But I think it has potential. I think we shouldn't underestimate the individual psychology here. I mean, of course, it's a business. It should be profitable business. There will be no drug like drug against aging in terms of earning potential. So this should be selfish. But I think this demography has a horizon that other demographies do not have. And they also have time to figure out how to do it. So that's why I'm always coming to this kind of events. I'm a believer that these people have time, horizon, and abilities.
We have a deep degree of gratitude for your support, by the way. So thank you. Thank you, Brian.
So we at Lagrange are very supportive of the DeSci movement and the DeSci community, and we actively want to work with everybody out there who's building and inventing in this space. And the reason for that is our offerings are a very natural fit for the movement in terms of finding that perfect balance of maintaining privacy where privacy needs to be maintained, but also for allowing for transparency and information sharing for the greater good. So I actually think ZK proofs are going to be an integral part of the movement's success in terms of facilitating the outcomes that we're really looking for. I think the biggest thing that will tip the scales for the movement is when there are actual big-time breakthroughs that can be pointed to. So the theoretical is great to discuss and talk about on the way there, but what will really, really tip the scales here are outcomes. When there is a revolutionary new drug produced by the movement, or a cure or whatever that big time headline outcome will be, that is really going to be the catalyst for all the other good things that come from the movement thereafter. And we very much want to be a big part of helping to facilitate that.
Amazing. Thank you.
If I can just make a wish, I have two pretty practical ones. Number one is let's accept aging as an indication so that a doctor can prescribe you some intervention, say, oh, this is to treat your aging. And two, let's adopt a right to try in more regions so that people don't need to fly to Mexico or Honduras for gene therapy.
I think on your second wish, it's probably going to become a reality more soon. There's, sorry, yeah, just one thing. So New Hampshire, Florida, a variety of other places are actually moving to right to try legislation, but beyond compassionate use. And so you're probably actually going to see them want to bring in experimental, and largely because it's economic reasons for doing it.
By the way, FDA already allows to test drugs against aging in dogs. So there are at least some mammals for which aging is already an indication.
Yeah, and so, I mean, one of the things we're trying to do is support new manners of market access, because someone has to go and build the market, right? And also you have to demonstrate there's demand for it. And so, you know, at least we sort of have those sides of things where there are some pretty significantly sized communities that can get out and be vocal about things, and then you get the sort of the ancillary capital support for being able to do it. But anyway, I'd like to thank you all very much. You know, like amazing insights, and you know, appreciate your time. So thank you very much.